Welcome to Chat With Me. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we have a very important topic to discuss for you guys today. We want to spread awareness on something that just isn't talked about enough, and we brought in 4 professionals to discuss this topic and spread awareness and help us understand better about human trafficking. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely, thank you. I'm Krista Hicks, Executive Director of One More Child Anti-Trafficking. I'm a licensed therapist, recently a certified clinical trauma specialist, and I'm also a second-generation survivor of trafficking. I am grateful for the work we get to do, and at One More Child, we have like a 3-fold part of our program. So we have a safe home for minor girls in the state of Florida, where we serve girls who've been trafficked and sexually exploited and just come from horrific childhood trauma. We are the Open Doors Outreach Network provider in 2 regions and covering 9 counties. A few of us are from the Open Doors Outreach Network, that is an arm of Voices for Florida. And at One More Child, we also have a large training and advocacy program, so we work locally and globally. We recently got to train governments in the Dominican Republic and Guatemala, and we also get to train throughout Florida and nationally. So we love what we do, and we're just grateful that you're asking questions and wanting to get to know more about what's happening in trafficking and the many ways it can look.
Thank you. I didn't realize how much I didn't know, and I'm hoping to learn more from you today, so thank you so much for being here.
Hi, I'm Tracy Corsa Parker. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I work with Open Doors for Florida as well. And basically, I'm a trauma therapist, and I work with the survivors that are in our program. It's a long process, but we're so glad to be able to be there and to work with them on an intensive basis. And we're a team, so we have a survivor mentor on our team and a regional advocate who's here with us today on our team. So it's just a really good combination, intense intervention for survivors.
You guys do such amazing work.
I'm Heather Case. I'm the founder and executive director of a nonprofit called One Purse. We use the power of the purse to provide sex trafficking survivors with scholarships and next step resources. And we really have a way to invite women anywhere to host One Purse gatherings, and it's a simple and significant way that they can make a difference in the lives of survivors. We say that we feel like purses are a renewable resource, and we take those in on donation, high quality, gently loved handbags, and we repurpose them to serve survivors.
Wow.
And we really see the care of survivors as a continuum. You have the identification stage, you have the stabilization stage, and then you have kind of transition to thrive. And that's really our place on that continuum, is really seeing survivors take hold of a new vision for their future. And we really feel that's what enables them to establish economic stability so that they can live the life they were intended to live.
That's incredible. You are incredible. All of you, this is amazing.
I'm Christy Gillis. I'm a regional advocate with the Open Doors Outreach Network through Children's Home Society and Voices for Florida. I'm also part of a HOPE team, which is a faith alliance that helps raise funds to provide housing for trafficking victims.
Thank you guys all for being here. Really, it just means so much. And I think there's so much misinformation out there that it's important for us to be here today to try to rectify that. So I think we should start with the basic definition. Like, what is the definition of human trafficking? Because I think we have a picture in our heads, the whole Liam Neeson Taken, that's what you think of. Absolutely. And that's not quite it. So would you mind defining that for us?
Absolutely. And I'll say, as a survivor, we have misconceptions too, which makes it really hard for us to self-identify. So I'm going to share the federal definition in the United States and just help explain a little bit, but then I'm going to ask you to kind of throw those definitions out because self-identification is such a long process that if we hold on to the definition, then we're missing the many men and women who are over the age of 18 who don't understand the coercive process themselves. So in the United States, under the age of 18, any person trading anything for sex with a minor is automatically a trafficker. Even the buyer is a trafficker, because the minute that they exchange anything, it doesn't have to be money, it can be roof over your head, it can be food, it can be a car ride, it can be getting your nails done, it can be anything they would use to lure that minor in. So then the buyer is a trafficker, and so is the third party person if one is present. Over the age of 18, the definition gets a little more tricky, and force, fraud, or coercion need to be present. And that can look a lot of ways. We see both locally and globally a lot of the initiation of coming in being boyfriend or someone close to the person. And so that makes it even more tricky, because how do you recognize that someone who's supposed to love you is coercing you? I mean, it's many years later that we finally pause and start to remember the beginning and our resistance. But over the years, you forget your resistance. You only remember your culpability. You only remember what you did.
So you wouldn't ask for help, or people around you might not recognize it if you don't even
100%.
understand what's happening to you.
Yeah, someone says to you, are you a trafficking victim? No, I made this mess of my life myself.
Right.
Now, when you get to the bottom of it and you start to pull apart coercion, it's just so often present. And those of us who do the work, when we work with adult sex workers, there's just at initiation, not always ongoing forever, but at initiation, there is so often coercion and force and fraud present then. And then from then on, becomes just messy. I always say, depending on what week you're meeting that 20-year-old who's either working the streets or working, in some form in sex work, one week she doesn't fit the federal definition, but the next week she meets someone who's supposedly a boyfriend, or we've seen her mom comes back into the picture when she's trying to quit and coerces her to stay, and it's just messy. And so for those of us who have survived it, we say, you can tell us your definitions all you want, but I don't care whether I was a minor or now I'm 20 or 24, and you want to say now it's sex work. It all felt exploitive to me. It all felt like I didn't know how to get out.
Right. That's just it's hard to really just soak in and sit with that. And I know that you guys are in the trenches every day fighting for protection and for prevention and all of that stuff. So what can somebody like me do to sort of recognize that the situation might be going on right in front of my face, or who feels comfortable answering that one?
Again, there's a lot of misinformation, and so making sure that you're looking at the right resources would be very important. We talk about the Polaris Project is a place that you can get a lot of good information. There's videos through the Blue campaign is where you can get a lot of information. There's videos, awareness campaigns. You can also outreach locally. Someone might have a task force that's going on, because in working in the trenches, law enforcement has one definition. They're looking at one thing, where service providers and people providing help are looking at something different. Right. Law enforcement wants to arrest a bad guy, where service providers, once you have those red flags, you're looking to help that survivor. We don't need that. We're not looking at having the bad guy arrested. We want to provide help.
Get them through it, get them to be able to move on with their lives, that kind of a thing. So working in the trenches, like we've said every day, what do you feel, Heather, would be important?
I just think...
Heather, I'm sorry, Tracy.
It's okay.
I knew I was going to do that. This is Tracy.
It's okay.
This is Tracy.
I just think at the end of the day, from a therapeutic point of view, there has to be a cultural shift. There has to be a shift in the lens that we're looking at people through and the judgment that we place upon people. So there has to be a shift. A lot of the survivors I work with struggle so much with social anxiety because of so much judgment they've received.
More the judgment than having been what they've been through, or wow.
Yes. So again, it's a shift that our culture needs to make. When we see a woman on the side of the road working the street, instead of saying, oh, she's saying what's happened in her life, how do I help her, is she even hungry? Krista will tell a story about, she'll just take girls McDonald's and say, we love you, here's our card, call us if you need us. It's really just about being the hands and feet and understanding that there's so much more to it than what we're seeing, than what we see. And there's so much exploitation. I have young people whose mothers will, have them do things for rent. Or so there's so much exploitation and so much put on these young girls and young boys. We're seeing that as well.
And that's what was fascinating to me. After you said earlier, you said men and women, and I was like, oh, I forget. You really think when you think of human trafficking, you think of what happening to women, but it happens to young men as well.
Absolutely.
I think another thing is in serving survivors, we often think of it as a very linear process. So we think, okay, they're identified, and if we're looking at the recent Taken movie, we think, okay, they're going to be rescued, and then they're going to get this care, and then they're going to launch into this different life. And
be grateful.
And be grateful, right. And it's just not a linear process. No. And those vulnerabilities that were present in their life at the time that exploitation entered, whether it be someone in their family or whomever has exploited them, if we don't address those vulnerabilities and provide them with ways to navigate forward, there's a high number that revert back. They're re-exploited. That's what they know. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Has the internet made it more easier for this to happen? It has. Is there a lot of trafficking that goes on the internet?
Absolutely.
Or through it?
Yeah. A lot of the dating apps, the girls will be, put on the dating apps, and there's a whole process to all of that. And then of course people target the younger people with games like Minecraft, and parents really need to be aware of what their kids are doing, and they need to be involved, and they need to be nosy, and they need to offend their kids, because the phones are not theirs. The parents are paying for them. The parents need to have full access, and they need to be in their kids' business. They can't just be like, oh, they're fine. No, because we see it all the time. Where
and also talking to your kids about it, and asking them, who is this person? Well, that's my friend Johnny. Where does Johnny live?
Right.
What do you really know about them?
Right.
How do you really know them? And as a parent, I have 2 children, and I'm always on their phones. You don't know that person. Delete, block, delete, block, delete, block. But telling them why. And we're here to, I want to make sure that you're safe, and I want to make sure that you're not sharing too much information with people that you don't know. Yeah. It's a whole new world from when we grew up with technology. Yeah. Again, the phones, because many times in working with victims, you'll also see friends that they may know that you've kind of heard someone's name that's mentioned, and that's how kids can get lured into trafficking, through other friends and through other people.
And then you have those underlying issues that she talked about make it to where it's not just about like, oh, once the parents realize, then they can invest all this time. I mean, we're talking so many generational problems and so many underlying issues, and then you add that device to the outside world that's unsupervised, and you just make it like this perfect storm, because at One More Child, the majority, whether in our safe home or locally, globally, we are seeing that the family system is so broken down, and that even if trafficking isn't the second generation of the person we're working with, trauma is. And so the mom or the dad come from a history of trauma. And so the energy and the ability for them to cope with life and have parenting skills and even do the things that we teach them, like we can teach them all day long how to take care of the phone, but if they don't have the relational skills to parent into the teen years, and if it's cultural to push a kid out of the house, well, now you have beautifully, our nation has done well with holding parents accountable to not pushing them out. No more of that throwaway child as much. but yet that means the parents are trying to keep them in a dysfunctional home where they don't want them. And we actually see where they have zero interest at that point. They're done. They come from trauma. They don't have any skills. They've written this off because culturally that's what parents from the life I come from do when we turn 15. And so when we talk about educating, and then you have this phone of this outside world that wants to lure that kid in and say, I'll be your pseudo family, I'll make everything better.
Wow. There's so many questions now that I'm hearing you and I'm like, oh my gosh, feed me more information. So what is the targeted age group typically? I know it can vary, but is there a more susceptible?
Statistically, you see the age of 12 is when
12.
it starts. So,
And as a mom of 4, one of the things that I've tried to impart to my children is the internet and social media is not a place we make our friends. It's a place we connect with our friends. So if we don't know this person before entering that space, it's not a place to get to know them. And some people may perceive that as a hard line, but from everything I've seen, it's,
it's so simple, but I never thought of it that way. I love that. And also while you were talking, it made me think that the support, when you guys offer support to these survivors, it has to go through the whole family probably too, right? I mean, not just the person who...
And most of the time I think that we see that the family is open to getting help for their child, but it's important that we meet them where they're at. We can't say, you need to do, you have to do substance abuse counseling today, you need a psych eval tomorrow, you need this. How can we help you? And we need to meet you where you're at and what you're ready to do, because again, they need to be able to make that decision, and it's important that they can make those decisions.
And understand, if they do come from a history of trauma, how to get them the right referrals, so that while we might not be the ones who are going to wrap services around the parent in that way, everything we do is going to be built upon, if that family can get the right referrals to get the help they need, then they're going to be able to work with us better for that.
So collectively as a group, a lot of the organizations work together to meet different needs. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's really great.
and to that point, a survivor we provided a scholarship to not so long ago, I was able to count 5 different organizations that had been involved in her story in a good way. In other words, it takes each organization doing their part, pouring in to the family, to the survivor, to really equip them.
And also going back to making sure that the basic needs are being met. I know we've talked about in our team meetings, you can't do therapy if you're hungry.
Right.
So
and also they're more susceptible, like you said, to go back into some undesirable lifestyle if they need food.
Right.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times the men and women that we work with are mislabeled as substance abuse addicts. But the truth of the matter is they're sent off to a substance abuse program and then the trauma is never addressed. So the substance abuse is really a symptom of the trauma.
Well, to cope, or
Absolutely.
to get through, to survive.
And I say that I, was a heroin addict, crystal meth addict, and every time that I went for help, they wanted to take the thing that had made me not literally kill myself.
Yes.
And so how are you going to take that from me and leave me alone with my own brain? And then finally I went to a place that just had a really wise woman who today I would know was a survivor of trafficking herself. And then we didn't understand that 16 years ago, but she was wise enough to understand that sex-related trauma was the core of my story. And that until I addressed that, I was going to need medication, whether street and illicit or prescribed.
Sorry, I'm trying to hold myself together. I mean, you just told me that using drugs was your only, coping way to cope, and
I stayed alive,
And it's amazing, and what you do is absolutely amazing. And I'm grateful for what you do. Thank you.
too.
Almost all of our survivors have issues with substances.
Absolutely.
How else would you cope? Right? And then does that make this vicious cycle, because now you need it? If you're doing hardcore enough drugs like you mentioned,
Absolutely.
you can't not do them after a certain amount of time. So now, are you now in this cycle where I have to
Everything
engage in
becomes
these
about that.
behaviors to get more of the drug that soothes me from what I'm and
And the shame just
cycle.
builds, and the judgment, because, you know, like we've painted a picture, we don't quite look like victims at this point. It's hard to want to help us. We look like often, not always, but often aggressive, drug addicted, you know, in my case, criminals.
Yeah. And the other issue is just lack of self-care. You know, almost every single victim that we've worked with has STDs. They have recurrent STDs. So now I'm doing trauma therapy with a survivor who is facing the possibility of, once she gets over this, she may not be able to have children because of the lack of medical care that they've received. So there's a lot of holes in the system, and we're really trying to work together to fill it.
And you guys every day are doing that. And it's got to be, you know, you got to get to the point where, why take care of myself? You probably don't want to be desirable, so you probably tend to not. I mean, I would think, right?
And it's not cultural.
And also with, again, going back to, especially with minors, having those conversations of when you have a child that's come back from runaway, even for a short period of time, a parent asks him, do you need to go to a gynecologist? Do you need to? The parents aren't having those conversations. And sometimes even when we talk to the child, that's not the initial thing that we're talking about, but then once they open up, like, there's some stuff going on. I don't know what it is. And I need help. I need help with that.
And the parents are in denial. Number one, if this is true, I'm a horrible parent.
Right. I'm having a hard time sitting here coping with what you're telling me. If I.
And number two, how has my child been exposed to this? And I didn't know anything about it. So there's a lot of, when the families are involved, there's a lot of family therapy that needs to happen with the parents. So yeah, it's just this cycle where the parents are embarrassed, they don't understand, they think the definition is like the movie. And a lot of parents.
And it's quick.
Right.
This situation could take months, right? If somebody really wants to get a child involved in trafficking, they're probably super smooth.
It's a grooming process. Yeah, absolutely.
I like the way you said that. It's a grooming process. I mean, I don't like it, but that's amazing. Tell me a little bit more about your organization.
Sure. So we provide kits that women can host one-purse gatherings. We say anywhere women come together. It's a simple but significant way that they can make a difference in the life of a survivor. They donate gently loved handbags. They choose a handbag that's new to them and give a donation for that. And then those are the funds that we use to provide the scholarships. And our service to survivors is kind of threefold. We equip them through dream workshops, which is kind of just a way to say, hey, what is next for me? We empower them through the scholarships, and then we encourage them, you know, just through coaching and mentorship and cheering them on. So
that's amazing. And how long has the organization been?
It's been around for 7 years.
Wow, that's fantastic. Do you have statistics on how many survivors you've been able to support?
Sure. In the last 3 years, and that's when we kind of pivoted to really seeing this underserved need of scholarships, we have served over 120 with over $100,000 in scholarships.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And Christy, if you don't mind, tell me a little bit more about your involvement, because do you automatically start working them once they're identified, or are you somewhere in the middle of the process?
So we're a team through the Open Doors Outreach Network. So we can get our referrals from, there can be self-referrals, law enforcement, a child protective service agency. You can have a family that has concerns. And our program is survivor-led. So it wouldn't be me or the clinician, it's actually the survivor that leads it. And it's a team approach in working with that survivor.
That's also very amazing. And then you said that sometimes they're self-identified. Is there ever a statute of limitations? Can somebody come to you and say, 10 years ago, I recognize now that I was in this really bad situation, I might need some support?
Well, with our specific program, we do have an age limit, but if we get someone that calls us, then we will try to help them still get services and support. It may not be necessarily through our agency or our program, but we don't want to turn anyone away if they're self-identifying as they were a trafficking victim.
Is there anything else that you feel that's important for people to know?
I mean, I think we all here, especially, she's not part of the Open Doors Outreach Network, and so we just are proud of Florida. We've come so far in a year and a half, and we want to see other states and even globally them understand the need for the wraparound care of the teams that Christy's talking about. Voices for Florida built Open Doors Outreach Network. We're in 32 counties, so they're with CHS as a provider, and I'm with One More Child as a provider. And then we all collaborate to make a network throughout the state, and we pull in other people for everything you could need.
Whoever
like
meets-
Heather with One Purse has that person who just coaches and is able to do the Dream Workshop. And then with the wraparound care, it means every survivor that comes to us, even if they don't know how to self-identify, but we can see that this is present, gets a clinician like, oh my goodness,
Tracy.
sorry, Tracy.
I didn't
Thank you. Yes, I didn't call you Heather.
Who would do that?
Exactly. That's right. So they get a clinician like Tracy, they get an advocate like Christy, and then a survivor mentor would be someone like myself who's been through it and then goes on to mentor. So these teams are through all of Florida now.
It's amazing. And does that happen often? Do a lot of survivors choose to help other survivors at some
Oh my
point?
goodness, yes. I mean, I can think you guys have stories like this, but we recently were at a sting, and it fits what we've seen so many times. So the young lady was above our age range. She was 28, and 24 is the cutoff for both CHS and One More Child because of the Open Doors Network. And so we were referring her out and just getting to know her, because then I just want to be friends with her. We just want to know her and still be part of her journey. And I mean, it was like 48 hours of she's in a shelter, we're sitting there and we're just getting to know her, and she's so amazing, and she's just asking how can she go get all the other girls that are being trafficked that she just left. And that is time and time again. It's actually hard to help them focus on how to get out, because the minute that like the drugs are gone or they're out of the life for just a second, all that we have is these memories of everyone we just left in this tragic environment that we just want to rush in and make it stop. We want to make it stop.
And one thing to add that's unique through our program, we talk about a network. So you might have a survivor, say, that was trafficked in one area. Maybe that's not the place that they need to be. They need to go across the state, and that's going to be where they can get healthy. So as being a part of a network, they're comfortable with us, and now we can say, we have that same team in this other part of the state, so we can get you to that network, and we can still stay connected with you, but these are our people, and they're here to help as well. So that's something unique to the network.
It's an incredible model, and I believe it's going to be the model.
Yeah, absolutely.
I believe nationwide, ultimately.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
we want to see it global. I mean, we just know this is what survivors need. That you know, like Christy said, there's so many reasons why we can't stay where we either find help or help finds us. And so, you know, to have us, like, I meet Christy and I'm days out, to tell me that now I have to meet someone else in the past would become this unhealthy relationship where I think the only way I'm going to do okay is if I'm right next to Christy. That's not true. But yet no one knew how to combat it. But now Christy's able to say, look, you're gonna be with me. I'm gonna love on you. We're gonna be good. And then you're gonna meet a bunch of people that I know. And she's already naming them. She's already showing that, like, you know, if you end up here, you're good, because we got this, because there's people just like me and we're all together. Like, it's so comforting and powerful.
And I think the really important thing is it's a community collaborative. So people like Heather are so very important because they pave the road for after the hard work that we did in therapy. So getting everyone involved and helping everyone understand that they can have a role in the recovery of a survivor in the communities that we live, and how important that is for healthcare providers and you know, nonprofits, and so everyone to get involved.
Healthcare providers, that's probably somebody who might see children or young adults and probably need to be trained on recognizing these, maybe an overpowering parent who won't leave them alone in the room with them, or things, maybe, I'm not sure, really what to look for, but I hadn't thought about it until you said medical caregiver, that these people should be trained as well to look
And
out.
there's new education that's coming out, and at least in Florida, there's new criteria where nurses have to be trained. So it's, as legislation changes, more people are becoming aware, and there's more training so that they can identify trafficking victims and be able to get help.
We are definitely going to provide some resources for everybody out there, but you are the best resource. You, the four of you, and I know there's many, many more that work in the field, but you are the representation that I have today, and every single one of you are absolutely amazing. What you do is amazing. Keep fighting the good fight. Now I feel like I have a responsibility to do my part as well. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing what you do.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you were here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and don't miss out on a thing.